Good afternoon and welcome to How to Find New Revenue Sources for Your Business. My name is Dante St. James, representing the ASBAS Digital Solutions program, and we're going to explore all the different ways to consider growing your revenue outside of the current one that you're stuck in. We're looking at diversification of revenue, diversification of income, and a bit of a diversification in the interests that you take in with your business. Let's get underway and share that screen. First of all, a quote from the founder and CEO of Zoom, Eric Yuan. Zoom does not focus on revenue goals, but rather we have confidence that focusing on the happiness of existing customers and our employees will organically increase growth. That's a message to take into today. Is not just to go looking for new income, but looking at ways that you can do things better in your business that allow you to attract more income and more revenue. Let's continue. What we're going to look at today is why you may want to look at diversifying your revenue and bringing that across to something a little bit more thorough and a little bit more safe than what you currently do. We're talking about the idea that you can gain new insights into the revenue you can find by looking at the strategies you can employ with that. The first strategy being about new business models. Then we'll look at the strategy of creating new offerings for your existing customer base. Then better use of technology, then industry innovation, and finally, we're looking at finding that new revenue by finding new markets for what you already do. This is brought to you today by Business Station and the Australian Small Business Advisory Services Digital Solutions Program from the Australian Government, delivered in WA by Business Station itself, in Brisbane and Queensland by Regional Development Australia, Brisbane, and by Treaty Business Consulting in the Northern Territory. You can go and watch this again later on, either through my own Dante St. James channel or from Business Station's channel. And if you haven't met me before, my background is in studying through this sort of stuff through the University of New South Wales with a Business Information Systems degree and marketing at the same time, double degree through them, as well as the Masters in Business Information Systems and Marketing. I've also done studying through the Chartered Institute of Marketing and the TAFE New South Wales. Do a lot of like little micro credentials there to just keep myself really sharp and knowing what those things are. I currently work with Facebook through their lead trainer program globally and through the community trainer program within Australia and through Google's digital springboard program, various government assistance programs, including the new business assistance with NICE mentorship in the Northern Territory. So let's start off. Why may you actually want to consider increasing the diversity in your revenue? And there's a lot of reasons why you might want to do this, and some of them are more obvious than others. In fact, sometimes we can look at this as being an unnecessary hassle, perhaps, that you don't necessarily want to do. Now, just a bit of housekeeping as we get underway too, that you can use the Q&A and the chat channels. I will have those open, so we'll be able to chat through those as well. Things change, but they rarely stay the same. And this is one of the main reasons why you may want to look at diversifying where your money's coming from and finding new revenue from other sources. Things like economic cycles. I'm living in a town called Darwin where we've certainly been at the nasty pointy end of economic cycles, coming and going, booms and busts. Trends and fashion are their own kind of cycles, and they can also cause you to have all sorts of concerns about where your next dollar is coming from. New technology is another place where it can be a little bit scary to know where that money's coming from, particularly if that new technology is taking away from your existing business. And finally, disruption and competition. We usually think of disruption as being caused by technology. Sometimes it's just for a matter that someone comes in with an idea that's a little bit better than the one you're working on. So disruption and pressures from the competition can certainly change the status quo of where your business is at right now. So let's talk about economic cycles. Recessions, they are definitely a thing. We've just been through one ourselves and we're back on the economic growth path again. Things like booms and busts can change a lot of things. For example, in places like Mackay, where there was a large boom, places like Gladstone in Queensland, Karratha and Port Hedland in WA, where there were very large booms of people coming to town and buying real estate and doing all sorts of things. What happens in boom towns, particularly those that are associated with resources and mining, is that they will be stuck on trying to get all the workers in town to work for them. And that you'll find as a business, that may actually cause you to have trouble finding anyone to work for you. So those kind of things, you've got to consider whether your current business model is able to actually come in and survive that kind of change. Because if a major employer comes to town and sucks up all the employees, then you may be stuck without having the facilities to open. Having availability of stock. Now, this one definitely rings true for the COVID recession. The availability of stock in a lot of cases just absolutely just went to zero. You go to a Kmart store anywhere in the peak of the pandemic, we're talking about June, July last year, and it seemed like all the shelves were empty. All the stuff that was coming out of China for stocking up those shelves seemed to cause the shelves to be empty. Now, things are flowing now. The worldwide economy has woken back up and things are coming through the ports, particularly the port of Melbourne now. So we've got stock on the shelves. But what is the next thing that may slow that down? We're in the middle of something of a trade war with China at the moment. So that could cause exports and imports to completely stop dead. And then we may have that same thing. You may have things that you're relying on coming from overseas to stock in your store or to stock on your e-commerce site, or if you're doing drop shipping, you're very, very much you could be a victim of change there. And of course, the availability of credit during economic cycles, when it goes down, credit's a lot harder to get, and people are often not able to pay back things like credit cards, personal loans, and whatnot. So when there's a lack of available credit out there, things like high ticket things, courses, high ticket coaching programs, high ticket appliances and computers and televisions, those sort of things that people don't generally buy with savings, they buy with credit cards. That sort of stuff is going to crash really, really badly. If you're overexposed to those kind of things, it can be a bad time for you. When it comes to trends and fashions, you look at, is your product something that's trendy? Right now, those little pop it things, they're like a sheet of plastic and rubber that you pop like bubble wrap. Those things are very trendy, but the people who are selling them have overwhelmingly said, we're not relying on this thing to be around forever. At the moment, we can sell lots of them at a great price, but we know that we've probably only got 6 to 10 weeks of novelty, and then that will go away and no one will buy them anymore. If you have a product that your whole business is based on, that's very much according to a fashion or a trend right now, what happens when it becomes unfashionable or untrendy? Or if your product is seasonal, say for instance, you're producing a fruit or you're producing a tour that's only available at a certain time of the year in a certain location, what happens when you're not able to do those tours or not able to produce that fruit? And are you someone who is actually really subject to fashion? Because you could get stuck with a whole lot of stock that you can't sell. And then all the revenue that you were hoping to get from that particular stock has now passed into a point where it's unsellable, and you may have to write down that stock, which might be okay for a tax return side, but not so great for getting your cash flow moving. New technology is an obvious one, because we can look at in the past and look at the successionism, which is where the horse and cart gave way to the car. The car then gave way to other technologies. We're now starting to see the beginnings of where cars as we know them today are starting to make way for electronic vehicles. Efficiency is in the form of new technologies that make a rival more competitive than what you are. They can produce things a lot quicker than you can and a lot cheaper than you can. That is going to affect your sales. We can also look at industries that can be wiped out to just a shell of what they were in just a few years. 100 newspapers in Australia closed down in the past 12 months. That means that something which was relied upon as a source of revenue in small towns and regional centres throughout Australia is now no longer there. So that particular revenue for businesses like News Limited or for Fairfax and the Nine Entertainment newspapers, that is no longer there. They cannot rely upon those sources of revenue anymore. And industries like taxis have been vastly reduced from the input from Uber, or things like phone books, which are almost, I've never had a phone book delivered to me in the last year in where I'm living. I don't even know if phone books actually exist in my town anymore. They might, I've just never seen them. So that kind of thing shows you there's a lot of, I guess, ups and downs, a bit of a roller coaster ride when it comes to new technology coming in. And then, of course, there's disruption. New ways can wipe out the old ways. If you find a new efficient way to do something, then the old way of doing it that you may be used to, you may be very, very knowledgeable about, will get wiped out. The same thing happened for, I guess, desktop publishing. We're used to using typesets and actually physically putting type letters into printing presses, and now we do it from the desktop. Then what happened is desktop publishing is given away to services that are online like Canva. So for instance, you may have been very, very good at using Adobe Illustrator or using Microsoft Publisher, but now you've got Canva, which has completely disrupted all that software and made it so that more people are now using that than are using Photoshop and Illustrator. Price disruption is a really big one that every single retailer in this country has been affected by. So you've got the effect of, say, Kmart has got a massive effect on department stores like Myer and David Jones. And we've seen from the 1940s and 50s where in Sydney and Melbourne, there may have been as many as 30 different department stores around the city. Now there's only 2. So you've got a very big disruption that came in the form of suburbs happening, new shopping centers, and discount department stores like Kmart, Target, and Big W appearing over the last 50 years. Then you've also got Amazon now disrupting those stores. So we've seen it in America where Walmart completely owns the retail landscape in America, along with Target, who is a bit more upscale than what the Walmart is. But Amazon is actually killing both of them off and eating them for breakfast by the fact that they can deliver it to your home and do it at a much lower price. And then there's also service disruption, where some new model of service can render you absolutely undesirable. So for instance, going into McDonald's, for me, as someone who doesn't really like talking to people behind a counter, is a much more pleasant experience than going to Hungry Jack's. I go to McDonald's, I can go to the kiosk and order what I want to do, and then someone comes and brings my lunch to me at my table. Great experience. Or I go to Hungry Jack's and I have to talk to a 14-year-old behind a counter who doesn't want to be there and doesn't understand half of what I'm saying and gets my order wrong. And that way, there's a new service model that McDonald's has brought out, which suits people like me, and we are using it in our droves. If I have to choose between going to McDonald's, Hungry Jack's, or KFC, just about every time I'll go to McDonald's because I can get what I want, how I want, the way I want it, and delivered to me. Great little service. So let's start to look now at the different models or different strategies you can employ when it comes to building out those new areas of revenue, where to go looking for them. And the first place we're going to look at is the idea of a new business model. And new business models are built from either a customer segment. So you're looking at saying your current business model is sort of based upon maybe selling something to women who are between the age of 25 and 45. So let's just say you're a fashion store. You are 25 to 45-year-old women. Anything older than that or anything younger than that tends to not come into your particular business. You may have then channels that you sell through. 25 to 45, probably going to be on Facebook. Great place to put ads for that particular demographic. Awesome, you're done. Then there are also the problems that you solve. So what it may be that you have been specific that you want to make sure you stock plus size clothing, so size 14 upwards. So if that's the case, then you are solving a problem of availability for plus size clothing for women between 25 and 45. So you've got a particular business model built around that. Your value propositions that you promised could be things like, you buy this from us and we guarantee that you'll still be wearing it in a year's time and still loving it. Or in the idea that bring it back to us and we'll do any sort of alterations, repairs. Those could be the value propositions that you promise, or it could be that it's quality of the construction of the clothing, or that you can always exchange it for something if it doesn't quite fit right. Your solution offering then can be something like, the fact that you already provide an alteration service for the fact that a lot of women who are not within the skinny sizes and are in a plus size area, and same thing goes for men. I shop at a big men's store myself, Johnny Big, my favorite place where this particular shirt came from, by the way. That sort of solution offering is that they're able to do on-site or at least same-day alterations to clothing to fit your specific measurements. Then your key activities, resources, and partnerships for your current business model could be things like, we sell clothing to plus size women. We have a shop full of clothing for plus size women and a warehouse that delivers to us and to our other locations. Your business model may also be based upon partnerships. We sell clothing of this particular brand that people are knowing and loving, or for this particular designer that people are knowing and loving. Your revenue could be based upon cost plus 30%. So everything that comes into your store is sold at the cost, and then you add a 30% markup on that to be able to make some money on that particular clothing. Or your business model may be based on cost plus cost of staff plus cost of premises broken down over a month, then plus 30% for profit. So then you start to see that your business model is based on those certain things. Then you've got the costs of things like shop fronts, air conditioning, power, water, staff, all those things having to be done as something which you need to do in-house in a store. Then your cost model may be based on that as well. So you base your cost on, if someone buys one, if you buy one, for instance, you have to pay $60 for it. If you buy two, you pay $50. If you buy 200, then you're paying about $25 per item. So as you buy in bulk, your costs come down, and then you can pass on that saving to the client or the customer. Now, of course, that's if you stay the same way, but those things could change. Now, some common ways that some big names that we might know of have changed their models is that, Woolworths have gone from just simply being a service provider, a shop front, to a product provider. And they've done that by creating their own in-house brands. So at the moment, you might remember old Woolworths and home brand brands that Woolworths may have had. These days, the brands aren't quite as transparent that they are Woolworths brands. So Hillview cheese could be one of those ones, which is actually an in-house brand. There's in-house brands of washing detergent, washing powder, cleaning products that are all particular brands that have been made up by Woolworths. So they're not just providing the service of distributing products that other people make. They're now actually making their own stuff and becoming a product provider because they saw an opportunity in the marketplace that they had to respond to the threat that Aldi was providing, which is almost a completely home branded supermarket. And it was able to produce high quality products at a much lower price. Woolworths and Coles have both responded to that by producing their own in-house fake brands, if you like, to make it feel like it's a bit more fancy. But the reality is it's just their in-house brand made by their in-house suppliers. Then there's the different way of changing a model that, say, Apple has done, where they just produce things like iPhones. So one of these things, they produce them. Now they've found that, well, that's okay. We only get money then from someone every couple of years. We want to get money from them all the time. So what we need to do is have some sort of services attached that will allow us to charge a monthly fee. So they've developed things like Apple TV Plus, which you pay a monthly subscription for, or things like iCloud, which you pay a monthly amount for, a yearly amount for. So there's other sources of revenue always coming in. So the lesson for you there is that you either go from a distribution model where you're just producing, say, in your shop, other people's scented candles and other people's fragrances, to then producing your own in-house ones. That's what Woolworths has essentially done. For Apple, they've gone the other way around. They're already producing their own thing. Now they want a way of going, okay, I don't just want to produce this one-off sale. I don't want to sell this one thing once every 2 years. I want to be able to charge for something every month on top of that so that I can get recurring money coming through. So you may be someone who produces those scented candles, right? That's your product. So if you've done that, then you can look at, okay, the monthly thing I could do is, hey, instead of selling one scented candle once every year to this person, how about I set up a subscription program where every month they get sent a new mystery scented candle or the new scented candle of their choice. So they don't even have to think about it every month. It's just that $40 comes out of their bank account and I send them a new fragrance of candle every month. Then you've got that recurring revenue coming through, just like Apple does with iCloud and Apple TV Plus. And then there's also a move from things that are physical products or physical shop fronts to digital products or digital shop fronts. And we're seeing the rise of digital shop fronts and a lot of brands that have gone now. So Dick Smith Electronics no longer exists as a business and a company. They no longer have shops that you can go to, but they do still have a shop front. Now it's owned by Kogan, which is another digital shop front. And it's being positioned as, rather than a Dick Smith shop, it looks like Dick Smith. They're using the brand Dick Smith, but it's pretty much all the same stuff you can buy from Kogan, just with a familiar front end and a really simple to use website. They've gone from physical storefronts to a digital product and a digital storefront. The same could be said for Netflix. Started off by selling DVDs that they could distribute via mail and you would send back by mail. Then they moved on to a place where now in America, at least not in Australia, where they had the ability for you to be able to buy, rent DVDs from boxes at shopping centers and then return them to that same box. And now finally, they're a digital only product. The only way you can get Netflix is to subscribe to their digital product so that you can download and watch their movies and their TV shows. But they've also gone a step further and they've changed their business model again to add in original content. Whereas before they were just distributing everyone else's stuff, now they're actually producing their own. They're actually funding and producing and making their own TV series and their own movies as well. So a business model change doesn't have to be one thing. It can be quite literally looking for the thing that's right beside what you're already doing. In Netflix's case, going from physical DVDs to streaming DVDs. In Apple's case, going from selling something to selling something that works on their device. In Woolworth's case, selling other people's things in their supermarkets to selling their own things in their supermarkets. So they have a better control over the supply, the cost, the price, and the quality. So ask yourself a few questions. If the business model change is for you, look at what room you actually have already to create a new business model. So what room do you have? Say, for instance, if you're working from home and you're building your business from home, if you go, I'm going to see clients in my spare room, great, that's fine. Then what happens when you have a lot of clients coming in, you've got a waiting room, where do they wait? So you start to go, do I have the physical space I need to do that kind of consultancy work? Or do I need to move into an office or a shop front? Or look at what kind of room you've got in your time to be able to produce a new business model. So you may have a physical store. Do you have the time to go and develop and then maintain and then do the packaging and the posting and the shipping that's involved with doing an online store as well? Or do you need to completely upend your whole business model and say, stuff the shop, I'm just going to open an online store because every sale I'm getting through there is far higher margin than what I have to do when I've got a physical shop, because I have to pay for rent, I have to pay for staff, I have to pay penalty rates, I have to pay for electricity, I have to pay for a remodel of the store every 2 to 3 years. No way, mate. I'm happy to stick with what I've got. Thanks. I'm just going to build a website. Then look at what changes to your business model would have a big impact on your life. So it may be that having a physical shop front or office to go to has been part of your social life, has been part of your sanity for the last 20 years. You remove that, and then the impact on you could be quite dramatic. So for instance, your whole social life was built around having that shop and that strip down the road. And now you're just working from home where you're not running into people every day. And most of the people you're talking about are on Zoom. Pretty much the life I live. I used to work in an office and now I work from home, and just about everybody I meet with is on Zoom. So I don't really meet with a lot of people in person every week, with a big change. So I had to then consider whether that change is a very big impact on me. Then look at what parts of your business are at risk or some sort of disruption or change. And this is when we're asking a really serious question. What am I doing that, with trends that are going on in the world and changes of technology, is vastly at risk from going away? And that will then ask you, where are you over invested? If you're getting 80% of your income or more from one single source of customer, then you're in trouble, because that one person could go and you're reduced to 20% of what your capacity is now. That's something which sole traders and contractors every day need to be able to keep on top of. If there's one place that's giving them over 80% of their revenue, then they're very vulnerable to that one place not being available anymore. Look at where the market's heading as well. If the market's heading away from shop fronts and retail into online shopping, then you've got to consider you may need to move in that direction as well. And if you're a startup, ask yourself this: what would I quickly and easily change if I didn't have all this stuff I need to drag along with me, like shops and warehouses and stock and staff and contractors? If I was just me on my own, what would I change to be able to make a move quickly to respond to the market or to technology or any of the other changes going on? So option 2, looking at creating new offerings for your existing customers. This is a great way to make extra money, because you're not essentially doing anything vastly different. All you're doing is just providing a new opportunity to upsell something. This all then comes down to how well you know your customer, because your customer is your greatest asset. usually when you sell your business, it's not because your business is so wonderful and your stock is so great and your product's so awesome. Usually you sell your business because your customer base is really strong and really attractive. And a buyer looks at that and goes, I want those customers. Quite often I refer to the changes of banks over the years. So I've been involved, I was originally with Advance Bank, which was a Sydney-based bank from many few decades ago. Doesn't exist anymore. It was bought by St. George Bank. Then St. George, so they bought it because they wanted the customer base and the computer services that came with the Advance Bank. Then St. George Bank was bought by Westpac. Now, when Westpac bought it, they bought it because they wanted that customer base. They wanted access to those customers to upsell new things to them because they saw that value of that customer base is growing and growing and growing. So they bought St. George. Then the same group bought Bank SA and Bank of Melbourne for the same reasons. They wanted to buy that customer base because that customer base can be upsold to new products, and the products can be much more efficiently delivered if they're done under the combined power of a bigger bank like Westpac. You've got to consider, though, that you may not know your customers all that well because you're only a very tiny little insignificant part of their lives. They don't walk around all day thinking about you. They walk around all day thinking about themselves. We work from a very skewed perspective of what people think because we're working in our businesses. We own our businesses and we think about our businesses all day and all night and every week and every year, and we're obsessed with them. No one else is obsessed with our business except us. So we need to understand that there's a certain thing that our business fulfills in someone's life, and we're not quite as big a deal to them as they are to us. So that's when you go, I don't really know my customer at all because there's stuff outside of what I do with them that I really need to understand. So the questions you need to ask yourself to really understand who your customer is so that you know what additional services to bring into their life are things like, what are the other things that your customers do that are close to what you already do? So if you're selling women's fashion to your customers, then what is alongside of that that's not a huge step away, but it's something which they need and want and desire? It could be adding a shoe range, an accessories range. It could be adding a makeup counter. It could be doing all sorts of things that allow someone to go, while I'm here doing this thing, which is related to this thing and this thing, I can do them all in that one place. And that's how things like department stores were born, pretty much. Someone's out shopping for a dress. They may also require shoes and a belt. They may also require, because they're shopping for something new, getting their hair done. So we saw department stores starting to build hair salons and beauty therapies into their stores as well and their experiences. Then look at how difficult is it for people to do the things they want to do, and what kind of pain does it create along the way? So if it's really difficult for someone to go from shopping for a dress to shopping for a belt and then getting their hair done, you could go, there's something I could do here while they're shopping for that dress that will make the whole process of everything they want to do much more easy and much more smooth. Say, for instance, hey, you're buying a new dress. Is it for an event? It is. Oh, where are you getting your hair done? Oh, I usually get it done there, but they're all booked out. Hey, we work with these guys who are something, might be something you own, or you may also have a hairdressing salon attached to your business that you can then refer people to. So creating a system where the pain of going from one need to another need is smoothed over and made very, very simple to go, I can satisfy this need, and this need without having to go to 15 different places. You're already creating a second, third, fourth line of products that can work in with your business. Ask yourself, when are your customers feeling frustrated, uncertain, anxious, and worried? Now, this is where people who have started up a lot of online stores have preempted this. They said there's a whole bunch of people, particularly in younger generations of people, who do not want to go to shopping centers, who feel anxious and afraid of going into them, and they just do not like being around all those people. Now, those who pivoted their businesses towards online delivery and online sales also had the advantage of being ready for something like a global pandemic. They couldn't have known was coming, but they were already ready for that. And those who are already doing it have the ones who have made the better money out of COVID. Then look at, what are your customers doing that they shouldn't have to be doing at all? Say, for instance, if they are buying that dress, but then they realize that nothing in the store fits. This is what happens to me when I go to Cotton On. I can't shop there because they don't have my size. They only go up to about, I think, a 1XL or 2XL or something like that. And I'm beyond that. So I need to go to specific stores to do that. So I no longer go to Cotton On. I know I can't go to JJ's. I can't go to Connor or Taracash or any of those, or YD or any of those stores like that. I have to go to a very specific store that makes things in my size that I feel comfortable and look good in. So what are customers having to do? Now I have to go to other stores. What happened is the group that owns Taracash and YD and Connor created a store called Johnny Big. Same company, but created a way of going. We are losing out on the increasing amount of big boys and tall guys and things that don't fit standard sizes. So we need a way of making sure we get that market too. So they created Johnny Big, which is their way of getting that. A similar thing would go with the Witchery group, who then produced Maggie T, which was a plus size women's clothing store. Now, some of these clothing stores do and don't exist anymore, but the point is that they saw that people had to go elsewhere to get what they needed. And so they looked at creating something that satisfied that, something that actually answered that question nice and easily for them. Their great villain then, which is the next question, was that nobody sells stuff in my size. So they created an offset, a hero to offset that great villain of no one sells things in my size. I really suggest, if you want to have an understanding of how to get inside your customers' heads, to understand what it is they need and desire and what their pain points are, you try reading a book called Creating a Story Brand by Donald Miller. I quite often do this particular webinar based on the processes involved in creating a story brand. In fact, I've got one a little bit later this month. If I look it up on the calendar, it's coming up in sort of late in the month, around about May the 18th. So if that's something of interest of you, May the 18th, I will be doing a Creating Story Brand session that's based on Donald Miller's process of looking through how to find out what your customers actually want and how to fulfill that for you. If you can identify more of those significant problems your customers are facing, you can then uncover a lot more opportunities to upsell them to new products that you do in new ways. If they don't have to go to another store to buy more of those things, then they're shopping for that with you. And as you know, you can sell them one thing and you'll get a certain amount through. But once you start selling 2, 3, 4 things, the compounding effect of that extra profitability for you is great, because that's one less customer, or even 3 or 4 less customers you have to go and chase, because your existing customer who's already buying that one thing is now buying 4 things, which is why every time you go shopping for clothes, they always want to sell you something else, because the profitability is so great. Once they have one person's effort selling one thing, they're paying, $40 an hour for that person. But when they sell that 4 things, they're only essentially paying $10 per hour for each of those things to be sold. So the value is much stronger when you can sell multiple things to a customer. Your third option then is leveraging technology in the business, and technology has had a massive effect on every area of life. Our poor grandparents will be, well, I don't have any left, but all my grandparents, now that they're gone, would be spinning in their graves if they understood just how phenomenally different the world is today. In their day, buying a ticket on the bus was a physical affair. You'd pay with cash, you get a ticket. These days, you flash a card in front of it and it automatically charges back to an account somewhere. Things are changing faster and faster all the time. So consider, are there new and upcoming capabilities and technologies in your particular industry that you might not be aware of? I've got a great story about this a little bit later on. We're going to show you through my particular diversification process I went through from taking a web design business to what I now own. Go back here. Then look at how might new technologies change your business and the needs of your customer. So for instance, McDonald's have got onto something where ordering on kiosks is a very important part of their workflow now. They're not going to get rid of those. They are there to stay. So what they've now created is a demand for other restaurants to have similar things. When you don't want to have to actually deal with a waitress coming and taking your order at a table, you can just order it through an app. That's a great experience. I did that actually in where was the restaurant I went to just the other night where they did that? And it was an awesome experience because I was able to order it just directly from my phone. No one had to come to my table. I didn't have to go up to anywhere. I think it was I want to say it was Zambrero is where I had that dinner. And it was a great idea because I literally just ordered everything on my mobile phone and then they brought it to the table. It was a great idea. Now I want to look for that elsewhere because it means it's one less point of contact I need to have with anybody. Then we look at what data might you have that you're not leveraging to its fullest potential. And by that, we mean what are the things you already know about your customers, that you already know about their behaviors you're not already using. So that's when we look at things like, for instance, what do you know what the demographics of your customers are? Do you understand who they are? Have you only got a couple of customers, so you really know them well? Or have you got a couple of hundred customers, but you don't really understand who are the customers that buy more? Sometimes when you have point of sale systems and customer relationship management platforms and Facebook accounts and Facebook contacts and that, there's data you can pull out that actually give you information about who your customer is and where there might be more money to be found. Let's just say, for instance, you get into your Facebook page insights and you learn that you thought that most of the people looking at your Facebook page were actually women, but then you learn it's actually men from 45 to 55 buying things for women. So you would look at that and go, wow, that has vast implications on the kind of advertising you'll do, vast implications on the kind of language you would use when you're communicating with people. That's the kind of thing you want to learn. Have you got data out there in things like Google Analytics, in your customer relationship management system, in your notes, in your customer records, in your Facebook account that actually gives you way better information about your customer than what you ever thought you had? And then what key questions are you unable to get good answers to right now? You may find that you do not have access to good information about your customers. If that's the case, something like getting more acquainted with things like your Facebook insights or your Google Analytics or your TikTok insights, if that's something you're using, is a great way to get the information you need to make better decisions about what people expect. In fact, in places like Google Analytics and Facebook, they can tell you that perhaps 78% of people who are accessing your website are doing so from an Android phone, not an iPhone. Yet you're always talking about iPhones, using photos of iPhones, or you're optimizing everything for Apple, when the reality is most of the people who are accessing you are actually doing that through an Android device. So just little questions like this, you may not know the answers to, but there's chances are there's data out there in your social media properties, your digital properties, or even in your logbook that you use, or your visitor information book that you use, or guest book that you use, that people have been filling out for the last 3 years. Now, it is very natural to struggle with technology. It's not just people like my parents who didn't grow up with technology that struggle with it. It's people like myself who I call myself a digital native. There's always been something digital in my life since I was a little kid, whether it's a little Game and Watch game or whether it was a Simon game where you just have to follow the patterns on the 4 colors. There's always been a digital aspect to my life, and I'm 46 years old. So you can imagine what it's like for younger guys and younger kids and younger girls who have done nothing but grow up in a digital age. For the rest of us, though, who didn't, it's natural to struggle with it. We've got old systems that don't necessarily work well with our new systems. So we've got this old system of taking down customer notes in a diary, but that's no good for passing it on to the people who are in your virtual assistant set up in the Philippines, because they can't read your diary because it's in a physical book on the table. So how do you then find a way to meld that together? Well, do you need someone to fill in all those customer details and data entry into a new system? That's where you get that clash between old system and new systems not really working together very well. You may have bad data. You may have, missing data. You might have, the idea that you have no idea who it is the people who are buying your stuff or what they're using it for. You just know that people are buying it. Or you may look at something like Google Analytics or something like Facebook Insights and go, I have no idea what I'm looking at here. How do I interpret what's coming through? There's an old saying that you can make data say anything you like, but there are certain ways of interpreting that data to make some sense of it and to understand what you can take out of it to make better decisions about your business. Or are you getting unreliable information coming from people who just don't know what they're talking about? You often find this with like IT guys. because they know how to fix a computer or connect your modem or recycle your ink cartridges, doesn't mean they necessarily know how to build a website, create a digital marketing campaign, or help your Instagram account to reach more people. There's people who quite often will give you advice that they just don't know what they're talking about. Now, I can give you great advice on social media, digital marketing, websites, all that kind of stuff. But when I start to step out of that and start to go into the realms such as how to reconcile your zero account more efficiently, all I've got is my own skewed perspective on how to do that. Now, I do that by spending 5 minutes a day doing that. That's how I keep on top of it. What do? You may have a completely different way of doing that. So if you're seeking advice from people who want to give you that, then you've got to understand that there's a very, very good chance that they're giving you really poor advice because they're only going from what they know, not from what information's out there. When it comes to technology, you can get a lot of friction from other people in your business, assistants, staff, family, anybody who's working alongside you it could even be you that is causing the friction of adopting new technology. So understanding that it is natural to struggle with new processes and technology. So we're not demonizing anybody who has struggles with that. What we need to understand is the struggle is there, the struggle is real. And so we're going to make some allowances for people who are going to be a little slower to come along with it. Now, the danger in change is that you're too slow to change and you can become very irrelevant very quickly. These three examples are very, very, very telling. You become either irrelevant in the case of things like the Yellow Pages we were talking about earlier, that book is just not relevant to enough people anymore to have any real value. You can just ask your phone, you say, hey, Google Word, what is it there I want to search for? I want to search for an Italian restaurant nearby. I don't have to go to the Yellow Pages, get it out of the cupboard, dust it off, open it up, look in the fast find index for Italian restaurants, and eventually get there. I just literally pick up my phone, which is always on me, and ask it, even with my voice, what it is I'm looking for. Or if you're slow to change, you can become very undesirable, like taxis. Taxis are one of the most undesirable things you ever have to deal with. I don't know what it's like in your town, but in my town, they are disgusting. They're paint peeling everywhere. The drivers are erratic. They smell. They're often covered in plastic on the seats, so you're sticking to the seats in a very humid environment. It's just a horrific experience to catch a taxi. Someone came up with a better idea called Uber, and now there's Ola and Sheba and Didi and all sorts of different systems, and Oscar is another one that are much more desirable. You're in a much nicer car, the smell isn't bad, and it's a much better service. So now, because the taxi industry was so slow to change, they're now becoming increasingly undesirable. I don't walk outside of an airport, and I go to a lot of airports every year. I don't go out in the airport looking for a cab anymore. I book a car. I book an Uber or something like that. And the other point is that if you're slow to change, you also could become a little bit too expensive. Big department stores like Myer and David Jones are becoming less and less relevant to people as we realize that you don't really have to pay $250 for a shirt. You can go to a place I go to, Johnny Big, and get a great shirt for about $80. It's a lot cheaper. Or you can go to Kmart and get one for about $15, even cheaper again. So we start to find that sometimes if we're a little slow to change, we're not able to respond to the new realities of the market. And the new realities of the market may be that people don't want to spend a lot of money on something like a shirt. They'd rather spend a lot of money on something like a holiday or maybe a big dinner out. Your fourth option then is all about industry innovation and understanding that your new revenue could come from being an innovator in the industry you work in. Now, innovator is just quite simply someone who's able to see an opportunity in what they already do in the industry they're in, a way of doing something a bit different that's going to give them an edge, give them a point of difference. Your industry knowledge in your world, in the business you do, is like a moat around your castle, right? You're protected. Nobody can touch you. Nobody can come and take your stuff because you're surrounded by a big body of water and nobody can swim across it because it's full of crocodiles, right? Your industry knowledge puts you ahead of new starters. This is a fantastic place to be in. So you can use all these things. As an industry expert and professional, you're already ahead of others. As an industry expert and professional, you have experience of knowing what the patterns and trends and what all the past things that have affected your industry can do. So you're kind of feeling like you're ready for all that stuff. as a professional, as someone in your industry who knows what they're doing, you have a head start. And that means that others out there are going to need a lot more money and a lot more time to be able to catch up with you or even have any effect on your business. And as someone who's an established player in there, as someone with a lot of knowledge, you already have the best people in the game working with you. So the idea would be you would use your knowledge to continue things changing, to continue innovating, to continue finding better ways, faster ways, cheaper ways to do things. You'd use your experience of patterns and trends and past changes to continue to be ready for the changes around the corner. Having a head start means that you're going to be able to have that money put away so that if someone does come along, you can react to it, spend a bit of money and keep ahead of them. And if you're already in there, you know that if changes happen where a new player comes to town, you're ready because you already have the best people and the best minds working for you. But at the same time, there's an offside to this. The wrecking ball can come in and your industry knowledge can be your greatest weakness as well. Your industry knowledge can make you have blind spots, make you complacent so you can't really see what's coming. You're so busy focused in on what you're doing and you're being so good at it, you don't see someone coming from the side with a wrecking ball ready to knock your business model over. It gives you experience that creates only one perspective of what's happening in your industry. So for instance, if you were an innovator 5 years ago, and I go through this all the time, if you're someone who was very valuable in your industry 5 years ago and you haven't updated anything in the last 5 years, you haven't read, you haven't studied, you haven't learned anything new, then you are at really great risk of somebody coming in with a new approach and a new perspective and a new fresh set of eyes and looking and going, why would they do that way? That's so inefficient. Let's do it this way and save 50% of the cost. And then you get wiped out. At the same time, that even though you may be ahead and someone has to spend a lot of money, really good, really strong, really well thought out and really disruptive ideas tend to attract really good funding and investment from outsiders, whether they're venture capitalists, bank managers wanting to lend money to be involved in a great industry and a great investment, or even just business partners. It's amazing how Coles and Woolworths have been able to maintain their lead in their industries based upon the fact that they don't just put in protections in place to make themselves still out in front when it comes to their supermarket business, but they've been able to invade all sorts of other areas because they had such great stuff they could leverage. Woolworths are now moving into the catering and supply to restaurants business. And they're doing that because they already have logistics everywhere in the country. And they're going, what can we do that gets us more money? Of course, we'll go into like supplying restaurants. Why wouldn't we do that? We've already got the product. We can get it out there. We've got the trucks. We've got the delivery systems. We don't even have to change a thing. We'll just use what we've already got to do that. A good disruptive idea is going to attract a big investment like it did. Now, sometimes those investments don't pay off for the other guys, like Masters home improvement stores failed miserably after spending billions upon billions of dollars to offset Bunnings. Bunnings is now the last man standing. There's no competition to them, barely apart from local home hardware stores. And the problem with having the best minds and the best people working for you is that unless you're keeping them happy and unless you're keeping them well paid, they're going to move where the future and the money are. If they see that this company has come up against you, has a far better future and better career prospects, they'll jump really quickly. They'll even take, in some cases, a pay drop to go and do it because they don't feel like you're going to be around in a year's time. So understand that your knowledge of the industry is a good thing, but it's also a bad thing if it's not used to be able to innovate. If you're using your knowledge to keep things all the same, just understand that a change will come. A wrecking ball will come into your life. So ask yourself, to avoid these things, where are you being inefficient? Where are the things you go, you know what, I've been doing this way for 5 years. It might be a better way of doing it. Then look at who are your competitors who are not delivering good value to your customer. Now, if you can look at a competitor like that and find holes in what they're doing, trust me, all your competitors can look at you and find those holes as well. So practice looking at competitors and seeing where they do things poorly. So then you can see, oh, actually, we do that poorly too. Look for where you're not aligned with the best interest of your customers. Sometimes we get a little bit arrogant, a little bit complacent, a little bit, oh, I'll stuff them because I'm the only one in town. So they either deal with me or they don't live with anyone at all. If you're that kind of person, that kind of business, oh, you're in danger because it only takes one corporation that's already in town or one other player in town to diversify a little bit and start eating your dinner. Then look at what you're doing that's antiquated and has no value to anyone anymore. That sort of stuff is where you go, oh, why am I doing that? I'm selling this thing, but I'm not making any money out of it. That's taking away focus from the things that really matter and that are growing. And look at the people who are making inroads in your industry, even if they're somewhere else. And look at how could I use what they're doing to get more money out of each customer or more customers out of my market ahead of what I'm doing now. And then look also at, can you do something that will bring extra value to the customer that will also bring extra value to you? Remember, we were talking about before of getting those extra lines of business in there. If you're selling dresses, why not sell belts? Why not sell shoes? Why not sell makeup palettes and all that sort of thing? Because you're in that position where you're selling something to someone that's very closely related to those things. So it's not a huge jump over to get the extra revenue that comes with those particular things. Of course, you need to do your due diligence and make sure that those things are actually going to be bought. But at the same time, understand that sometimes you take a risk. Just try one thing and don't do it in huge volumes. Just try something new and see if it works. The final option is finding new markets to send your product and service off to, so your business can now compete in different places. But before you enter a new market, just do understand that not all products will suit all markets. Understand that you need to know who is already doing stuff in that market that you're doing. And then also, are there others who have tried and failed to enter that market? Because you can learn a lot from the failures of others, and they're often very well documented in newspapers and corporate reports of people who you might be competing against who are much bigger than you. And then consider, do you even have the capacity to service that market? Now, there's a very, very good example given from people I was advising about a year ago who were trying to sell a particular product into China. They then said, China's too hard, let's go to India. They went to India and said, I want to sell it through Amazon, and then realized their big problem is that Amazon requires for you to put your product in a lot of numbers in 6 different warehouses around India. They had to realize that they actually don't have the capacity or enough for that product or the money to invest in getting that much product to put that much in those warehouses to begin with. So this is where they came up against a big problem. They didn't actually have the capacity to service that market. So they probably need to look at a smaller market where they can be in one warehouse and have much slower numbers until they get enough sales to then grow up and then invest ahead for the bigger markets like India and then perhaps China in the future. Let's look at an example from moving a business like Muzzbuzz, which is a drive-through cafe concept from Perth to Brisbane. I can tell you now, there's, I think, 1 or 2, if any, Muzzbuzzers in Brisbane. It's not a thing that translated well from Perth to Brisbane. We've got one here in Darwin, just the one. Now, if I look at the not all products suit all markets, I go, there's a difference in the climate from Perth to Brisbane. Less hot drinks are consumed, more cold drinks are consumed in Brisbane. So does Muzzbuzz actually have a product set that fits enough with warmer climates? Given there's one in Darwin, I'd say that definitely does that. So that's a good thing. Then look at who is already doing what you do in that market. Now, for Muzzbuzz's case with drive-through cafes, you've got Zaraffa's Coffee in Brisbane, DeBella Coffee, Merlot actually has some drive-through locations. And of course, the big kahuna amongst them all, the big gorilla in the room is McDonald's, who are they are the biggest coffee retailer in the country and also the biggest seller of drive-through everything. So you've got to go, okay, there's someone to consider it. If there's already all that competition in Brisbane, is something like Muzzbuzz, an unknown brand to Queenslanders, ever going to make a difference? And then look at others who have tried and failed to enter that market. So for instance, Jamaica Blue came from New South Wales to try and do that same thing and failed. And it actually cost them millions of dollars because they couldn't secure that market because it was already well served by existing players. And then go, do you even have the capacity to service that market? In the case of Aldi coming to a place where I'm in Darwin, they initially looked at Darwin and then realized they don't have the capacity to serve everyone in Darwin with the same pricing structure that they have in other cities, because they need at least 5 stores in a market or close by to a market to be able to make a distribution center that makes sense in that particular market. There was no capacity for 5 Aldi stores in the Darwin region, so they pulled back out and decided not to come here. So they didn't have the capacity to service that market in the way they'd like to. Another example could be Natural Cover, which is a business I worked with probably a couple of years ago. They wanted to sell their products to China, but they looked at that and went, do all products suit all markets? Well, in this case, the market at the time, 2 years ago, was highly motivated to buy natural, organic, and natural sourced products, especially with bush foods and all that sort of income, to go to China. It was very popular and they had a big market going for it. So yes, it suited the market at the time. Who was already doing what you do in that market? A lot of Korean skincare products were already invading the Chinese market and were doing amazing numbers. So the whole problem there was that somebody else had already started doing this in a really big way. Now, the difference is Korean products are very much about beauty. Australian products tend to be about purity. So there was a very different approach and a very different kind of customer. So they went, well, you know what? We could probably still go and do that. Then they looked at, are there others who had tried and failed to enter that market? Now, Natural Cover looked at other things like Natural Glow, a lot of those only bought on TV kind of systems that have tried to go to China and have failed. So look, there's a lot of people who are a lot bigger than us who have failed, but their failure was they had to sell and send a lot of stuff over there. We're only just drop shipping from Australia and potentially drop shipping from somewhere like Indonesia, where it's a lot quicker, a lot cheaper to get the stuff out of Indonesia into China than it is from Australia to China. And then they had to look at that and go, do we have the capacity to service this market, considering we are producing and bottling this stuff in Australia and we're a very small thing? What happens if this becomes popular and the Chinese market really embraces the product and we can't service it, we can't deliver it? What happens then? So that's when they had to look at whether they were actually able to go to China. They pulled back and said, no, we're not going to do that for now. What we're going to do is selling to Korea, because there's some people who won't buy the Korean products. They might actually want to buy something that comes from a different place. Different markets may use different approaches. The Australian made logo may work really well in some places in the world, but right now it's not doing so great in China. We will probably all know the reasons for that. The Territory Proud logo will do very well in the Northern Territory, but probably not so well in Tasmania, where it has no real effect. 100% organic will do really well in those markets that really value purity and the idea that organic is somehow better than non-organic. But then you'll get to other people looking for a scientific approach. So it's the difference between something like a local organic producer of skin creams to Clinique and Shiseido, who are very much about purity gained through science rather than purity gained through the idea of plants being better than chemicals. And there's an importance, finally, as we go out, of diversifying your revenue streams. And this is my approach. I started as a web designer using a system called Joomla only. This is around about 2015. Very quickly learned that not many people knew what Joomla was and didn't tend to trust it. So I had to diversify to WordPress and Wix as well as Joomla. Then I found that my initial price disruption that sold me a lot of website jobs was then met by others in the market. They came down to my price. So to offset the fact that I was stealing all the work. So then I had to diversify to things like social media management and Facebook and Google ads and, SEO and Google stuff as well. Then I had to go, well, the market doesn't really value you doing that stuff because they still think that they can pay $1 a day and advertise on Facebook, and they don't really want to pay any more than that. So I had to diversify into areas where I could find new higher paying markets. And that's things like the ASBAS Digital Solutions Program, working with the NICE program, entrepreneurship facilitators, Tourism NT, doing training workshops with them, doing training in the products that I was always an expert at, but delivering that to people who wanted to be able to do it themselves. Because I discovered that, funnily enough, people didn't want to pay for this stuff. They did want to do it themselves, unless you jumped up to a much higher level of business. Then things tended to change. Because these things opened me up to new markets beyond the one I'm just living in, I feared that there was a risk that I'd just end up saturating myself in the market I was in. So I needed to diversify by getting partnerships and contracts with other players. My contract with Facebook, Skoll International, NBN as a business advisor, Google and Digital Springboard, a new one coming up for TEDx for a couple of regional areas in Australia, and then contracts with the Northern region and Southern region, New South Wales business enterprise centers. They all started to open up because I had the partnerships with Facebook, NBN, and Digital Springboard. But then COVID happened. So I had to pull back into my market. So I had to undiversify into doing more work with Tourism NT, with the Northern Territory government, with government programs. So last year, just about everything I did was related to government programs and government grants. But then I had to diversify again because this year, the boom in subsidized and grant related work kind of just crashed. So now I'm looking at diversifying in those new markets I was aiming for up and down the east and west coasts and down the center as well, that allow me to grow out my influence, grow out my customer base to more places again. So this is all stuff that happened since 2015. And now I'm also looking at diversifying my revenue outside of just the training, just the producing stuff in a digital marketing agency, and looking at a cafe product that I actually sell directly to cafes, startup support of new startups within the Northern Territory and North Queensland, a skincare product that I won't go into that I actually do sell on a wholesale basis, some foreign exchange trading that I do through a third party who does that for me, is producing revenue, and of course, cryptocurrency as well. So there's a lot of diversity you can find that may not even be related to what you do. Skincare and cafes are not even the slightest bit related to anything I'm doing. I'm not interested in Bitcoin or in foreign exchange, but I know that make me money. So they're things that sit over there and kind of work on their own because I'm part of a group that does that. That produces a solid bit of income that helps me every month and makes me less dependent upon somebody else's stuff coming in and paying me for my time. So let's just do a quick recap before we go. There are important reasons to diversify your income sources because no business is 100% immune from changes coming down the pipe. Secondly, new revenue comes from various approaches. So you choose the approach that works much better for you, whether that's changing your business model or looking for new markets. And then start with diversifying to the things that are close to the things you already do, and then sort of branch out a little bit further. Consider becoming a consultant in what you do or running training workshops in the things that you do in your business. There may be opportunities right next door to you. Thank you so much. You can book more webinars just like this one, or book a one-to-one consultation with myself or other great advisors in the ASBAS program at businessstation.com.au. Take down my email, send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. If you're watching this on YouTube, why don't you like, comment? I'll answer those comments as soon as I can. But more importantly, subscribe to what's coming through on Business Station or through my own YouTube channel under my name, Dante St. James. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon or this morning, depending where in Australia you were. And I really do hope that you continue to spend more time growing your business by working on it, not just in it.